It's called AgeLess?
That's right now that's the name, but it's capital less for less. So it's like not ageless, but ageless.
Yes.
Somewhere
It's like
in the
age
gray.
later.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, you stole the good name. So.
Interview 3, take 1. Mark?
I think everybody realizes, right, at some point growing up that, you know, we age, right, and we get sick. But most people, I guess, find other ways of coping with it than just getting depressed like I did.
At that time, you were not supposed to say or not even discuss that you could extend lifespan, because then you were a fraud, you know, a charlatan. And then I was thinking about it and I said, well, I think you can. I see no scientific reason why we would not be able to do that. I mean, aging is a problem like cancer. And 100 years ago, people laughed when you said you can do something about cancer, not? And they said, no, of course not. That's part of life, so you have to accept it.
I was initially studying cancer biology, and then I realized, okay, the highest risk factor for cancer is age. If you target just one diseases of aging, such as cardiovascular disease, then you ended up exchanging one disease with another. So the idea is, why don't we target the root cause of all these diseases, which is aging? Then you will be able to target many diseases simultaneously.
But then there were these, in the 1990s, there were these great experiments with worms, where they demonstrated that only one gene, you change only one gene, is enough to make these little animals live twice as long.
So the idea that there's a genetic way to hack longevity was really, really very exciting for us. And really, we started thinking, just a minute, we can do it with one gene in animals, we can modify aging in mammalians, we must be able to do it in humans as well.
Every company that is trying to innovate and bring products to market that perhaps are slowing down some aging processes needs to masquerade as a company treating another disease, because aging is not considered a disease and no one cares about prevention. Right now, there's no infrastructure to get that to people, to test it, to reimburse it, to do a short study to show these health outcomes. So I think that essentially what is happening with our current regulatory infrastructure is that there are certain incentives that are not aligned, and there's not enough incentive for focus on prevention and helping people, addressing them while they still have their function.
Unlike what we do with drugs now that are targeting a very specific disease, we are trying to show that we're affecting a cluster of diseases. Metformin was used in the early 1900s to prevent flu and malaria and inflammatory disease, when it was discovered that it lowers glucose in diabetic people, so it was kind of hijacked to diabetic people. But now, almost 80 years later, we have preliminary data to really show that if we give metformin, whatever disease you're going to get next, you're not getting it. It'll be delayed or prevented all in all.
If we take an old, heart or leg or any part of the body and replace it with a young one, all the damage that was there, that complex damage, will be replaced, and you'll have a young body part again. You could do that for the body, but the brain remained problematic. Right? The brain is who we are. You can't replace the brain with a new brain. So it wasn't until like the last 15 years that I realized that this was doable for the brain as well if you replaced it sort of part by part or piece by piece rather than the whole thing at once.
We accepted menopause as something that has to happen. But the fact that it's not conserved in any other species is certainly true that it's not an evolutionary imperative, right? It's only present in humans and 4 types of whales. And if you push the year of menopause just by 1 year, you could increase healthy life expectancy by 2.2 to 2.6 years. The age at which women lose reproductive function has remained constant since the introduction of medical records in 1800. At 35, your ovaries turn geriatric, so you spend 2/3 of your life infertile and then 1/2 of your life in the stage of poor health post-menopause. So I just said okay, I have to do something about this.
We are really convinced, based on the molecular and cellular phenotypes that occurs during aging process in the ovary, that geroprotectors should work to improve reproductive health. We now initiated human clinical trial to evaluate the effect of rapamycin in delaying reproductive aging in women. To us, it will be a landmark study because no one has ever looked at that.
Your chronological age and your biological age are not the same. For most people, longevity means you get sick whenever you get sick, and now you live longer, but being sick longer, which is really not what I'm trying to do.
So if you would say, like, would you like to live longer and have, the wisdom of your 70s, 80s, but then the function of your 40s and 50s, I assume the majority of people would say yes.
I think that's where some of the pushback may come from, is that this is completely foreign an idea to many people. And so in that sense, very upsetting. I mean, this is true for a lot of technology throughout humankind, right? Even the bicycle was like frowned upon and argued against and called immoral, and because it was not natural.
Diseases are natural, right? Evolution hasn't dealt with aging, okay? So yeah, this is really unnatural that we had a lifespan between 19 and 35 for 100,000 years, and now it's 78 and we get all those diseases and bad quality of life. It wasn't natural. It was natural to die.
It's kind of the normative thing. If you don't accept aging, it's like you have a psychological problem or something like that. And that, of course, is still in our culture.
There is a catch, of course, is there's a cost involved, right? And just like healthcare today, not everybody gets the healthcare they need. And so, the goal would be, as a society, to make this available to everyone.
Inequality will increase, but it always increases when you've developed a beneficial technology. It takes time for it to reach everyone. So for any society that has socialized medicine, any welfare society, it would be great things to simply tax and pay for, because it will pay for itself. It would be an enormous investment, right? So people who stay young, for example, won't get Alzheimer's. So that's 300 billion we would save, and that could pay for the medicine.
People in the field of aging research believe that the geroscience paradigm will revolutionize medicine.
I'm now actually very pessimistic about it. And you say, well, you changed your mind. And to some extent I did, because aging is a particularly difficult problem.
It's very complicated. It's probably harder than it was in the early 60s to think of putting a human being on the moon, right? JFK saying, by the end of the decade, we'll put somebody on the moon, and yet the technology didn't exist yet, but they did it.
And I think it'll be profound from a medical perspective, from a social perspective, and from the government perspective. Once they see the huge impact, the economical impact of such effect. If TAME succeeded, the next day, metformin will be the most sold drug in the United States. Nobody's going to make lots of money of that, but that's how it will be.
Attitudes will change drastically and quickly, because I think a lot of people haven't really thought through this. Why? Well, because there's really not much point, most people will think, to not liking aging. There's nothing you can do about it.
I think people will come around to the idea that, this is great. Life is precious. We have more time to do all the things that we wanted to do, weren't able to do, spend more time with our loved ones. We don't have to see them age and get sick and struggle for a couple of decades before they die. It's really hard to imagine how, once this is doable, that it won't be seen as something very positive by most everybody.
200 years ago, if you would have said we can once fly like a bird, they would have thought you were crazy. But now we fly all the time. So it's very difficult to say no. As a scientist, you can never do that. You have to take into consideration that it is possible. Because if you don't believe things like that, how can you make those steps in the future all the time that science is doing? That's not going to work. That's why you really need to be innovative and never believe that something cannot be done. Scientists are not such people, not down-to-earth people. Scientists are people who really believe that they once will be able to fly when there's no evidence that they can. It's people who believe they can be immortal. Well, now, of course, no evidence for that. We need people like that who have no borders. They basically always want to fly.